The Asian American and Pacific Islander community were shaken to their core in March when Robert Aaron Young went on a rampage at 3 Atlanta area salons, killing 8 people, 6 of whom were Asian women. In late July, Long pled guilty to 4 murder charges and is due in court later this month for charges related to the other deaths during his shooting spree. The Fulton County District Attorney is charging him with hate crimes and seeking the death penalty. Long's attack galvanized Asian American and Pacific Islander civil rights activism over xenophobia that the community suffered through since the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. In the wake of Atlanta's shooting spree, Stop AAPI Hate activists began to collaborate with Black Lives Matter demonstrators across the country, calling for solidarity and to mobilize marginalized communities to promote change. Joining us to discuss the need for solidarity between the Asian American and Pacific Islander community and the Black community is activist and son of Yong Ae Yue, one of the Atlanta shooting victims, Robert Peterson. Robert, I am very happy for you to be here. I want to say first off, sorry for your loss. Our hearts are with you and our sympathies are with you. Why is this a mission for you to bring these two particular groups of people together in the wake of this shooting spree?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you again for having me, Charles. I really do appreciate it. This is important to me now more than ever because it's personal. My mother, I think, was murdered because of who she was as a Korean woman and where she worked. And so, me being a Black and Korean person and living that experience, I think that it's important that I have a unique experience and a unique opportunity to show the struggles that we all suffered through. Are not really created against each other, but more against white supremacy.
What do people talk a lot about there being friction among minority groups in America, including between the Asian community and the Black community. Do you find that to be true? And if so, what is the genesis of that?
Right. So I definitely see and hear that narrative, right? We often talk about this tension between African Americans and the Korean community, and there is a history of that. But I think that that is, again, another way to pit marginalized groups against each other so that we both lose focus on the system that upholds racism against both of us as Asians have experienced this violence recently, and as African Americans have continued to feel this violence. Again, it's the same systems that are oppressing both groups, but we often talk about this tension that exists between African Americans and Koreans or African Americans and Asian communities. Again, creating the stereotype that African Americans are the aggressors and that Asian communities are the victims or entrepreneurs that are suffering at the plight. And I don't think that is the narrative that most of us experience. I don't think that's the correct narrative. And I think the better narrative would be why are these individuals or why are these groups both in marginalized positions?
Do you think displacement is part of the anxiety here? For centuries, Black people were the majority, the largest minority group in America. And after immigration laws were reformed in 1965, there was an influx of Asian people. There were Asian people here already, but there was an influx then. There was an influx of Hispanic people. And I think right now, if you look at the Hispanic population and also the Asian population, more than half came after 1965. The relationship of Black people to the country is just very long and very deep. And what's going to happen in the future is that Hispanic people already outnumber Black people. By 2035. There'll be more Asians in America than Black people. Black people will move to the third minority group. Do you believe that this idea of displacement is also part of that friction?
Again, it's definitely a part of it, but it's not the majority, right? I think that while those groups are still growing, and they're growing at a faster pace than African American groups, but again, Asian groups being the fastest growing minority, many within those groups are still marginalized, are still blocked out of access of power, politically and socially, economically, and that's what leads to a lot of our problems. So, although they're growing in numbers, we're not gaining access to these spaces where that we're being seen. So, again, if you think about the murder of my mother, again, we have humanized the suspect more than we humanize the victims in this, and so that again resonates with me because he gets the benefit of the doubt, and my mother and the other victims didn't get that plain humanity, even though they were of different races as well. So yes, displacement, but no, I don't think pitting one
Mhm.
against another is the answer. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
What do you think the Asian community and the Black community can learn from each other and lean on each other for in the quest for equality in this country?
I think we can use each other for our resources, and again, the history of activism that exists in both of our communities. As African American communities, again, we have been marching in the streets for a long time. We have been trying to implement new policy and get a lot of reform done. And Asian American community is now being heard. Our voices are now being listened to, and so I think both of us can come together to realize that we're both being again sidelined and denied access to positions of power and of economic opportunity, the same as our counterparts. And so if we do that, we can build a better coalition through unity than we can in fighting against each other, because we're fighting over scraps.
On a personal note, as you said in in the answer to the last question, the killer gets more humanized than the victims in this tragedy. What do you want America and the viewers of this show to know about your mother and to remember about the life that she was able to lead?
Well, again, my mother has been here in the United States for more than 25 years. She married my husband, a U.S. soldier. Again, my brother is a U.S. soldier, a retired U.S. soldier. I went to school, and again, she loved her family. She was just like any other woman that had family, that wanted to work. She was honest. But for me, in her death, I realized that this is not only about my mother, nor about only those 8 victims on that day, because when I saw the coalition of people that came and gathered to embrace my family and I because of this situation, they felt or saw themselves reflected in my mother or myself or our family. And so what I want the world to know is that this is about Asian Americans. This, I want you to see her and see her through me, and see her and see me through her. That's what I want. And so that's the coalition that I think we can bring together.
Mr. Peterson, I want to thank you so much for your time. I also want to let you know that you are in our prayers, and your mother will not be forgotten, and she will not be erased. And those women who were killed by this in that shooting spree will be remembered as individuals, as much as and more than the killer was. Thank you so much for your time, sir. Your Black History Moment is next.